Hello. We are in the age of information. Information is all over our place, all around us. And what exactly is information? Do we think of anything that is being described? Do we think of triangles as information? Do we see different rocks as information, different kinds of information? And for example, this Rafflesia, the flower, the largest flower, or this group of meerkats as information. Imagine if somebody were to come to you and say, there is a structure which has three straight lines and they are all equal sizes with same internal angles, and the internal cumulative of those internal angles is 180. What would you think of? We would think of the equilateral triangles. Information is the way we perceive. The information is something that we perceive of an object of our interest or that is being perceived. We try to build the properties, we try to describe in our mind and describe to other people about the properties, and everything that is describable is information. It could be even something abstract as a dream, for example. It is still information. Information is something that is perceived. Anything that is perceived is information. There are multiple answers to it. In the same way, if we not just the objects that we see, but also objects that we can't see. There could be huge things like in the universe. What is a planet? A planet is something that revolves a large mass of matter that revolves around a star. And what is a moon or a satellite? A smaller object that revolves around a planet. We have definitions, we have descriptions of the properties because of which a person who is not viewing it or perceiving it can also understand what it means. Everything is information. Not just the greatest or the universe. What about the molecules and cells that we cannot see with our naked eye? That is also information, but we cannot see it immediately. But with improved technology, we are now able to see many things. We have reduced many things, and everything is information. There is something unique about information in the living organisms, and that is what we will talk about shortly. I am Dr. BCMR, Assistant Professor at Shastra. So, first thing, we will try to define what is known about what the definition of information. In the internet, if you just hit define information, you'll get something like this, which is pretty much good for us. What is conveyed or represented by a particular arrangement or sequence of things. So if you see the definition here, it is a representation or information or some properties or a description about an object, for example, or an entity. And usually it consists of a sequence of things. It should be having multiple stuff, and it should have been a sequence. And I hope you would easily agree with, we will take, for every information to be conveyed or represented, we need a medium. And that medium is language. Let's take as, we will try to use some analogy and try to describe what is language, how language conveys this information. Let's take, say for example, we'll also describe about how these units of things are going to play a role. Say for example, I give you two alphabets, and you are supposed to make any number of combinations and represent a communicate a point or a description about an entity. So how many different words can you probably make with that? Say M can be taken, E can be taken, ME can be taken, and EM can be taken. What I'm trying to represent here is trying to show that we need many number of units, like as in alphabets, to make complex words. Say for example, I just gave you me together as an alphabet or as a unit of language, and then how would you communicate anything at all? If you look at sentence 1, you can only, because there is no diversity, because me is given as a single unit, then you can only make as many sentences of which you are playing with the length. That is the only way you can probably differentiate how each is different. Say for example, in the olden days of counting, this would mean 1, this would have meant 2, this would have meant 3. Only the length of the units of language are depicting, and that is how we are able to figure out some things. Say these are important. Having number of units of language or the medium of communication should be multitude. Why we require that is only then we will be able to make diverse words, right? From alphabets we make words, and from words we build sentences following certain rules and regulations, and in the words we follow the spellings, and from sentences we make paragraphs, and each paragraph may be communicating one or more points or about arguments, and these paragraphs make an essay, or they could make these things as a song, or it could be a poem. So I hope we see that every information has to start with these subunits, and then there are certain rules of how something has to be read or understood, and that has to be systematic, right? This is, say for example, we have some of the sentences that make sense and some of the sentences that do not make sense to us. And sometimes we just have little bit modification, and there will be drastic changes in the way in what these sentences actually mean. This is kind of philosophical discussion on the medium, what information communication or the medium of information should look like. What are the essential features? The essential features are that it should have units, like as in alphabets, and there should be some rules. You can take any language, and that is what happens. Any medium of information, not just the language. You can take the binary code, for example, with the computers. Or you can take any of these 5,000 or more thousands of languages that are around the world. They all have alphabets. They all have grammar, some form of rules, so that everybody in that location can understand what it means. So why we are discussing this is we want to know about the genetic information. The genetic information also has to follow the same rules. If we are considering that a cell or an organism, or as we said, each of us is the physical manifestation of the genetic information that we have, then they should be following these rules. And that is what we are trying to understand now. Say for example, we have several molecules. We'll also try to reason which molecule is the best to act as genetic information. I guess we all know about the different biomolecules that are present in our bodies. The majority of them are lipids, nucleic acids, carbohydrates, and proteins. Yes, now we know because through the experiments done by Griffiths, Avery McLeod, and McCarthy and Hershey and Chase experiments, we know that nucleic acids convey the actual molecules of information, or the molecules that have this the genetic information. But then we'll try to reason why they are best suited. And one definition that we have to keep in mind about how genetic information is different from many other information is that genetic information is inheritable. That is one key aspect. It is something like the computer virus, that computer virus has information about itself to be propagated from computer to computer, or files to files, or folders to folders. The same way, the genetic information is different from many other information in the sense that it is inheritable. It should be able to make copies of itself. That is what is meant by inheritable. So the first thing is we need units, right? Language needs units, and it should be a sequence. So we need multiple units to increase the diversity, because a cell, for example, has nucleus, a cell has mitochondria, a cell has many thousands of reactions that happen in there. You cannot convey all those diverse things with one unit or same thing. What I mean is, say for example, if we have a feature, a phenotype, we have 100 phenotypes, then there must be 100 ways of conveying information. And if you need to have 100 ways, there should be 100 combinations, and those combinations will require that we have more number of alphabets or subunits. Only when you have diverse alphabets, you'll be able to make more number of words, and then we can create more ways of conveying and eventually result in different diverse phenotypes. So if we look at carbohydrates, here we are talking about it should be a polymer. If you're saying it should be a sequence, then it should be a polymer. Lipids are not polymers. Lipids do assemble together because of the hydrophobic interactions and so on, but then they do not form polymers. Yes, we do have long chain fatty acids, but there is a limitation of how much they form. And what polymers we can have are nucleic acids, DNA and RNA, or polymers of nucleotides. We have carbohydrates like glycogen, starch, cellulose. They can be polymers. And we also have proteins which are polymers of amino acids. The difference between, say, in carbohydrates is you will find majority of them, they are very long. They can be very, very long, of course. For example, in starch, all of them, it is a repeat of the same subunit. And at the most, even cellulose and others also, they may be branched and other things. The alphabet wise, if you speak, there is no diversity. And if there is no diversity in the sequence, then you are unlikely to be able to communicate or inform about a large diverse phenotypes. That is why carbohydrates are not the good candidate to be molecules of genetic information. What we are left with is then the proteins and nucleic acids. Proteins have about 20 different types of amino acids are made up of, those are the subunits, whereas nucleic acids have only 4 bases. If it is DNA, we will just say A, T, G, C, adenine, thymine, guanine, cytosine. So these ATPs, nucleotides of these nitrogenous bases, which ones can make diverse more diverse words, if you want to call it as. So having larger number is a clear benefit in that case. They can form high number of diverse molecules or sequences. They can proteins are very good in that sense. Nucleic acids are not so great relative to proteins. They do have diverse, these are 4 bases at least. There is, but then the number in relation to or relative to proteins, these are low. So what happens then? Which of these 2 molecules is a good one? If you see this, the proteins seem like the good candidates to be the bearers of the genetic information. There is only one problem, however, with regard to which of these 2 molecules is a good candidate for being the molecules of genetic information. As we discussed, anything we say, when we say genetic information, it's not just about communicating some information. It should be inheritable information. So what do you mean by inheritable information? Say, for example, there is a protein made of several amino acids, and say we will put a certain sequence. I'm writing the single alphabet code like that. Is there any way that this given protein sequence can give rise to another such sequence? So I mean, that should be the molecule that I'm saying. Say, for example, this is molecule X and this is molecule Z. Can protein X give rise to protein Y? Can it induce? There should be the dictation of information in the formation of Z that should be dictated by Y. If we understand or recollect the chemistry of the proteins, it's unlikely. There is no way that can happen. Whereas in nucleic acids, we have that. Say, for example, I write a sequence like this, then we know what it's going to be because we know base pairing. G base pairs with cytosine using 3 hydrogen bonds, and A base pairs with thymine using 2 hydrogen bonds. So if polymerization were to occur here, guanine would form 3 hydrogen bonds, so there is cytosine would have come here. So here is then T would have formed A, G, T, A, T, and C. I hope you realize that because of these hydrogen bonding, or because of this base pairing, the information that is present on the top strand can dictate what is in the bottom strand. I understand that the argument is that it's exactly not the same sequence, it's different. It is actually complementary. That is absolutely correct. What if we took 2 strands, double-stranded DNA? Say, for example, in the previous one I described as this as one information part and this one as another information molecule. Instead, I would want to say GATC A, so CTAGA. Can this whole double-stranded DNA give rise to similar or identical molecules? Yes, they can. Like if you can recollect if you know PCR, say I wrote the top strand here and the bottom strand is what I'm writing here, CTAGA. And now if polymerization did occur, and then the top strand would dictate what would polymerize here, the sequence of the nitrogenous bases or the nucleotides that may come here. In the same way, if you look at this trend, we will find that this is how the information would have gone. Now, if we compare the parent molecule with that of the daughter, the newly formed molecules, they're exactly identical, which means the sequence information that is present in the nucleic acids is inheritable. And that is the reason why DNA is much suited, or is the best suited for acting as a molecule of genetic information, or as genetic information itself. DNA is fantastic in multiple ways. DNA, like every other molecule is information. Every atom is information, every molecule is information, everything that is around that is perceived is information. And similarly, like any other molecule, DNA is also information. DNA is something more than that. DNA, or nucleic acids in general probably, are inheritable information. In our knowledge, or to our knowledge, I don't think there is any molecule that is inheritable information. And that is why DNA is special, because DNA is the only molecule where matter changes into information, or DNA is matter with inheritable information. Every other molecule is matter with information. DNA is matter with inheritable information. And that is the first time these hydrogen bonds have started forming. And that is where probably the seeds for life have been sown. And from then on, DNA, through the process of natural selection or evolution, has modified, and all the organisms that we see are what we are right now. Thank you very much. I hope you liked the discussion.